Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first of two Sage 100 year-end webinars for 2025. Today's session will be covering Aatrix, payroll, and fiscal year-end processing, as well as some tips and FAQs. My name is Alec Burke, and I have been with Sage for about 18 years. With me is Linda Raby, who's celebrating 28 years with the company today, and she'll be assisting with your questions in the Q&A area. On that note, please post your questions in the Q&A area, and we will do our best to circle back to any not answered during the presentation. There is a short delay after posting your question, so please be patient there. There's no need to repost your question. It should show up eventually. First off, I want to give a quick plug to our year-end center, updated and refreshed for 2025. Please take some time to visit the year-end center on our community for valuable resources. A direct link will be included in the slide deck, which will be shared along with the recordings of both sessions. But this is what it looks like here. It's out on our Sage Community Hub, lots of great links. It's updated with new and pertinent information for every particular year end. There's new stuff coming between now and January, so please keep an eye out and check the year end center regularly. So a quick snapshot of what we're going to take a look at today. For contents, we're going to take a look at processing prior year forms, some common questions there. What is year end all about? Fiscal versus payroll. Checking role settings, user management for success, setting up your users for success, running period end processing, what it actually does, closing the payroll year, what to avoid there and why, what's changed this year in 2025, and what's coming next year, which updates do I need, how the various updates affect functionality and get installed, and then we'll get into the software and look at some of those installation steps. So first off, this question is coming up more and more often, not just at the end of the year, but throughout the year, often with Affordable Care Act forms, funny enough. But the common question is, can you process forms for prior years? And the answer there is yes, but you will need to reach out to Aatrix for instruction first. Aatrix forms update automatically, so you likely won't see the prior year forms in your form selection list, but the company does have a process for handling this. So please reach out to them before submitting any prior year forms. More contact information is available at aatrix.com. So that's aatrix.com. And jumping right in, what is year end all about? So the difference between fiscal and payroll year end is essentially that fiscal is about the business processes, of course, and its own defined periods, where the payroll year is more about the government reporting. So fiscal year close is mostly about keeping users from posting to periods that should no longer be available, no longer be posted to. It's also a time many businesses choose to run physical counts on inventory and other housekeeping tasks. Obviously, any inventory shrinkage losses need to be accounted for during the correct period and posted as a loss to the GL. But it's also about determining profit and loss for the year. Because the majority of entries are going to roll up to the general ledger, as well as the way certain modules will post to each other, there is a guideline to the order of closing modules. And it's also about a logical flow of information. You wouldn't close your accounts receivable before posting any pending sales orders and closing that module, right? However, it's not critical, and the period end processing can usually be run in the order the business would like, as long as the general ledger is closed last. This is another article you'll find linked directly on the slide at the end of the slide deck. So, and those will be posted on the community site along with the recordings of this session. Payroll year end will always be centered around the calendar year as the standardized period for reporting wages and taxes. Another common question at year end is how to split a paycheck between years if some wages were earned in December and some in January. And sometimes I'm a little surprised at how often this question comes up, but it kind of feels like a natural thought, right? The answer is you don't. If the check date is January, then the wages are recorded for January, which is the IRS reporting standard. Check date is the deciding factor when assigning wages to a year. There is an optional setting for general ledger accrual postings, which allows the user to apportion the general ledger postings only to the 2 adjoining months where the wages were earned. I'll pull up my install here for a quick minute. Of course, that's going to be in your payroll options. So payroll setup, payroll options. And this one's right on your main tab. Allow GL accrual postings. So some users do enable this option only at year end, but really normally it's either on or off for the full year. And again, it's only for the general ledger postings that come from the payroll postings. So it's all about tracking your expenses and liability amounts in your general ledger. W-2 wages are recorded entirely for the payroll year and date on the payroll check or direct deposit entry itself. So again, if the check date is December, all of those wages, all of that belongs to December this year. If it's January, it belongs to next year. But it does kind of dovetail into the next slide here. You want to make sure you're setting your users up for success. And I wanted to take a minute to point out this role setting, which may affect your users' postings. Screenshot on the left, you'll see the item you'll need enabled for any user needing access to the tax reporting functions in the payroll module. So just to clarify, these screens come from Library Master, Security, Role Maintenance, right? This is where you're defining the permissions and access, the role, which you then assign to your user. So the screenshot on the left, it's a pretty basic item you need enabled for the tax reporting functions and payroll module, and there's going to be a similar one for the accounts payable module. To the right is the option allowing payroll postings outside the dates of the current quarter, which many users find best left disabled to avoid accidentally posting payroll runs to the wrong period or year. We did actually have a case last year where 2 users posted one payroll to 2 different years, checks to 2024 and direct deposit to 2025, which is obviously best avoided. That was a bit of a mess, took some work to clean up. One payroll should be posted to one date. So make sure you set this role maintenance option carefully. You may want to allow it on for your controller, but off for your regular data entry people. But of course, up to you. So running period end, what does it actually do? For the most part, the results of running period end processing are to shift the current period settings in the module options screen to the next period, keeping users from posting backdated entries. This is not insignificant on its own. It's really an important way to reduce human error. The other big impact of running period end processing is the purging of old data as set in each module's options window. So for this, we'll take a look at payroll again, setup, and payroll options. History tab, and we can see here years to retain payroll history is set for 5 in my install. But pretty much every module is going to have a setting like this. In fact, some modules will have multiple settings related to tracking. If you look at AP and AR and inventory, some of those will have multiple options about tracking the different history for different postings. So it's really a good time to make sure that the various modules are all aligned in the setting for years to retain so that your data tracking kind of all lines up. But beyond that, the closing of the year in general ledger triggers the calculation of profit and loss, and of course the posting of that profit and loss to your retained earnings account. Very common question at year end is, can we delay period end processing for general ledger? Can we delay closing the fiscal year? This comes up all the time, and the answer is sure, that's fine. The program allows you to, but it is just super simple to reopen a closed period, and it's safer to handle it that way. Again, you're looking to keep people from accidentally, usually, posting to periods they're not supposed to be posting to. So we'll look at general ledger for this example. But really, most modules will allow this functionality. The big exception is payroll. Do not be reopening years in payroll. That's a whole other thing. Payroll is always special, but for the most part, most modules, including the general ledger, it's a very simple procedure. You just jump into the general ledger options. You can see the year I have set currently is the period we're currently in, if I was running a calendar fiscal. So if I needed to reopen the prior year to make some postings and adjustments, I just set the year back to that period, push accept. I make my postings, I update my register up in my general journal entry or whatever I'm doing. And then I come back down, once those are posted, that register is updated, I come back down to general ledger options and I set my period back to where it was. If you're following through these steps, there's no need to run another period end processing if the first one, if that year was already closed properly by running period end processing the first time. You can just switch that option back to where you were. And like I mentioned, payroll is always more complicated. There's also the closing of the year-end payroll, which is going to trigger several important events at year-end close. Went over a fair bit of this last year, but it all bears repeating because I know there's going to be some, probably a larger number than I would imagine of newer users working in the software, and this is just good information to have and to understand how this all works. More and more we see people skipping their period end processing and payroll because with the role settings, the system will allow you to kind of post forward into the next year, and we're going to talk about why that's a bad idea. It still takes all of the, AI and all the stuff we have out in our world now. It still takes a thinking human brain to handle a lot of this effectively. To start off with, the check dates in Sage 100 are going to drive the data to be posted to the correct period. But the period end processing itself, that function is going to trigger several key actions. Start off looking at the deduction codes. Because again, we get calls on this every year. Deduction codes will reset according to the setting on the deduction code maintenance window. This feature was originally available for retirement plan deduction types, but was added to all deduction types as an option per customer feedback on the enhancement request page, which can it can be accessed right in your installs help menu. So I'm going to dive in there for a quick minute because this is such a powerful tool and not enough people know about it. I often, get the kind of comment, hey, could you share this feedback with engineering? And you can do that directly yourself. It's right in the help menu, connect with Sage, submit product idea. You do have to create a login for this. Very simple though. Once you're logged in, you'll be able to see all of the feedback, all of the product enhancement ideas that other users have posted. You can vote for those ideas and you can post your own. Obviously, we'd love to make everyone happy, but the most commonly requested items are going to be, most likely the ones that get included in future builds and future releases. So you can see here you've got A tab for completed, things that engineering has already built into releases, items that are planned and coming, and things that are still wish list items. This is regularly reviewed by engineering a couple times a year, and it may take a while, but this is really your best pipeline directly to engineering to give that feedback where it's going to count. So help menu, connect with Sage, submit product idea. Back to our deduction code resets. The example here is always going to be a 401k plan. Normally you opt into that and continue contributing when each new year begins, versus something like a garnishment or a loan repayment, which will have a set goal, and you would want it to drop off the employee's automatic deductions if they paid back that full amount by the end of the year, right? You would not want that to reset the goal and kick back in next year. You're going to have some unhappy people. It's important to understand that this function of resetting is triggered only by running the period end processing, and to check which deductions you would actually want to reset before you run that period end processing. Just to be clear for anyone who's newish to the software, every module is going to have a section for period end. So this is what I'm referring to here. Payroll, period end processing. When you're running that for your fourth quarter, that's going to give you a window that's going to prompt you that you're closing the fourth quarter and the year, and that's going to be the trigger for the things we're discussing. Next up is going to be the way PTO is handled and rolled over. If employees are lucky enough to be getting PTO and are allowed to carry over, most people are going to be limited in the amount of that carryover to the new year. Hence, there's a corresponding setting on the time off maintenance window for each code set up. So this is just a quick screenshot of an employee who has a carryover allowed of 40, see there, but the accrual and available amounts are way above that. This is somebody who should have taken more vacation before the year ended. So you can see, once I run period end processing, these amounts are going to shift like this over here. The program's going to see that there's more available than the carryover amount. It'll drop those amounts and plug that carryover to start off with 40 hours available for the new year. Okay. Direct deposit year-to-date amounts are also going to reset when running period end in payroll, which is important for obvious reasons, including that the amount prints directly on the direct deposit pay stubs. But again, I want to kind of reiterate that if any of these items are incorrect due to failing to run period end processing to close 2025 before starting 2026 payroll, you'll need to go in and manually correct in each employee affected. So do not skip running period end processing to close the payroll year before starting the new one. And part of the process of closing any module should be checking the data and the postings. For this purpose, my colleague wrote a great knowledge base article which walks the user through reconciling and checking payroll amounts and data. This was just refreshed in the last few days, and this is the article titled Tips for Reconciling Payroll Reports in Sage 100 versions 2018 and up. Again, it's also going to be linked in the on the slide for the knowledge base articles I'm referencing. But you can also find it yourself. So help menu, support, resources. And this is going to open up a number of links. You'll see here right in the middle, the knowledge base, search Sage knowledge base. And that'll open up to look like this. And here's one of the key articles for year end is our year end processing resources for calendar year 2025. But all these articles can be searched here. You can search by the ID number or just the keywords, of course, or use the slide with direct links that'll be included and posted on the community site. So Brings us to another very common year-end question, which is, how do I make changes to payroll amounts for the year once all payroll is processed and paid out to employees? Because we get some really creative thinking questions at payroll year-end, and the user's got to use their own logic in determining what corrections are acceptable, if any, right? Reporting should accurately report any earnings, fringe benefits, taxes paid, whatever during the year. The reporting should accurately report what happened and what was paid. Ideally, any corrections necessary are made through payroll entries. But if that's not possible, then the steps to edit the employee's wage and tax history directly are fairly simple, and we'll review them more in depth during tomorrow's webinar. These steps can be found in the article titled Edit Employee Wage and Tax History in Tax Summary. Again, either using the slide included with the links or searching directly in the knowledge base. And I put lots of screenshots in that article to help walk you through the process. But everyone loves a quick demo, so we're going to take a quick look. Again, got to just reiterate, you should really have an eye to be careful with this. It's a powerful tool. You need to be changing things in a logical way to reflect what actually happened. But all you need to do is open up employee maintenance. I'm going to use my trusty old lady demo built into my demo data. And we're going to come up here to the top right, the More button, down to Tax Summary. So first screen we're going to get is basically kind of just a snapshot with some totals. According to the selections at the top, you can see this goes back for the history of the employee and as many years as you're retaining in your payroll options. We're going to stick with federal, but you can see it's also going to track anything that's been posted to this employee. We're going to come up here to the More button, down to Detail. We get another window here, and this is going to give you kind of a summary by month. You can see there's a lot of columns here. Obviously, there's a lot of data tracked in payroll. Wages, employee tax, you can toggle through these radio buttons, employer tax. But we're going to drill down again using this Tax History Detail button on the right. And finally, we're going to get kind of this blow by blow, this entry by entry breakdown. You'll see reversals here as well as negatives, if I had any. One key thing to remember here is always unhide capped wages. The capped wages will be hidden by default. If you're working with anything that has a cap, the capped wages are going to be the critical ones. This comes up quite often as well when people are making corrections here, necessary corrections, but they're fixing something for whatever purpose, and they adjust it, they make the adjustments, they go and look at the reports. The reports in Sage weren't updated. They're not reflecting that new number. And the reason is always that they have missed the capped wages. You have to push this button to unhide capped wages because capped wages are going to be the key wages for anything that has a cap, right? So Medicare for employer, employee, you've got Social Security, all the greatest hits. Down below, you've got the Fix button. And when you push that, you'll get another warning. Be careful. And that'll unlock all these fields for editing. What you have access to here is the core data that is going to be pulled into the major Sage 100 payroll reports, like the quarterly tax report. And it's also going to be the data that's pulled into the Aatrix tax reporting forms, like the W-2, for the most part. Obviously, there's a ton of data tables in payroll. Some of them you can't edit with this, but this is your primary editing tool, and it's a powerful one. It's going to affect data that's pulled into the W-2 directly. So again, be careful. I'm just going to back out of these windows. Okay. Oh yeah, I had a note here for myself. Really common, at year end that people will use those tools to track fringe benefits. It's somewhat, I mean, you want to process your fringe benefits on an actual payroll entry is the best way to do it. But if you've reached the end of the year and you realize that you've forgotten to do that, you can always go in there to edit the taxable wages, which is obviously you wouldn't edit the taxes because they wouldn't have been paid if they weren't processed on an actual check. But it's a way that you can record the taxable wages so that they are going to show up on the W-2 and the other forms as is required. That's kind of the most common example for editing those amounts at year end that, you know, is a good example. Okay, without further ado, what's changed in 2025? The key point to start with is quoted directly from the IRS website, confirming that the W-2s and existing 1099 forms will remain unchanged for tax year 2025. This is my first quote here at the top of the slide. There are still some changes, including the shift of reporting excess golden parachute payments from box 14 on the miscellaneous 1099 to box 3 on the NEC 1099. I don't expect a ton of people to be giving large golden parachute payments, but that is a change to be aware of if you're making those payments, and you'll need to be reporting it in box 3 on the 1099 NEC. Be sure to follow IRS guidance in reporting for this year, including Notice 2025-69, which states that due to the phased rollout of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act and the lack of changes to the 2025 Form W-2, 1099 NEC, and Form 1099 Miscellaneous, quote, employers and other payers will not be required to separately account for cash tips or qualified overtime compensation on those forms or the copies of the forms furnished to individuals for 2025, end quote. I included a link to that notice, but you can just Google IRS Notice 2025-69. It's a great place to start in your journey for this year end. You want to stay up to date on all that documentation, but you can get it right from the horse's mouth. So no need to report, separately report those cash tips or qualified overtime compensation on the forms for this year. But you need to be ready for tracking and reporting these items correctly for next year. And with the required updates released later this month, your Sage 100 install will be ready to do so. Please join our webinar tomorrow, December 11th, for a deeper look and discussion about what's been added to the program to handle those changes, and we'll also be tackling other questions that come up related to the OBBBA. It's a mouthful. Okay. Brings us to one of the top questions at year end every year: which updates do I need? And what do they do? Right? It's really important to understand what each of these do. I can't say enough. You always have to have a backup. Even just a couple months ago, I had a case with someone and it worked out okay, but she got lucky. It's so important that you do backups regularly, that your backups are complete, that you're keeping a series of backups, not just overriding the last one, that you're keeping your backups on a different machine. You can't keep your backups right next to your live data. If your server goes down, you lose everything, right? So another place where you need to take your human brain and apply reason and logic and make sure you're covering your own, behind. Yeah, we talk to people and sometimes they have to restore to backups that are several years old. It's painful. There are still ransomware viruses out there. Anyway, product updates to start off with are the PUs. These have been around forever. Product updates are basically a program patch downloaded and installed onto your local Sage 100 installation. And these update the full program code and all modules other than payroll. So if I jump back into my install, if you've ever called us to open a support ticket, which you are more than welcome to do, or open a support ticket on our customer portal. We're going to ask about which version you're running. It's really important so that we know the program code you're running. So help menu again, and this time it's on the right side, Sage 100, about Sage 100. This window is going to open up with some basic information. You can see I'm running Sage 100 Standard 2025. I've got build 7.40.2. So this is the product update here. Now, just to start off with, obviously I work for Sage, so I get these updates early. These updates aren't out yet. Our expected release date is December 20th, which is about the expected release date of the W2s from Aatrix as well. But that is, of course, barring any unexpected delays. Sometimes there is a delay of a day or two, but that's our goal, is December 20th. So I'm running 2025, which is 7.40 with product update 2. And that, again, updates all the modules except payroll. So payroll module is going to have its own series of updates. Right now, that latest one coming later this month is 2.26. It's really short form for the year, so 2026. The next one after that would be 2.26.1 when that comes out next year. This is going to update the program, the payroll module program code. Now that was left on its own series of updates simply because payroll's complicated, and when we overhauled the payroll module program code, I don't know, 8 years ago or whatever, it was left independent so that we could quickly update it without affecting any other modules. We know we have a lot of customers who run custom modifications on their programs. So that payroll module update is still critical, and it's going to update the program code for the payroll module. So in your help, you'll see there it's just separately listed here. Now, contrast that to the payroll tax update. The payroll tax update is the one that will pop up and prompt the user to download right in the program itself. This update is going to synchronize some tax and payroll settings updates from our payroll tax cloud down to your local install. The example I always give here is if there's a new filing status introduced by the government, that's how it's going to get down to your local install. Those aren't usually going to come from the payroll module update because those are really program code changes. Tax filing changes are going to come from our tax cloud. Well, they're going to come from the government first, and then they're going to come from our tax cloud, and the payroll tax update will synchronize to the tax cloud, and then you'll see those options show up in your install. Taxes, way back years ago, in the old way the payroll used to work, you used to download tax table updates, which would install the actual tax rates and tax tiers into your local machine. That's not how it works anymore. All the tax rates live up in our cloud. They get updated automatically. And there's a great way to keep track of that as well, right? So when you run that payroll tax update, and you can wait for it to prompt you, or you can run it at any time in the software, payroll, utilities, payroll tax update, right? Again, always good to have a backup in place before you install any of these updates we're talking about. The way the payroll tax update works is basically the way it works, it's often triggered by antivirus and firewall. So you don't want your antivirus or firewall kicking in and interrupting the process halfway through. But if you have a backup, you're always covered no matter what happens. Of course, you want to tailor your antivirus and firewall settings correctly for our program to work correctly. And there's a knowledge base article as well if you search for firewall settings. But basically, once you run that, it'll prompt you to run the payroll tax update report. When you preview that report, you're going to see the list of everything that was changed. Now, of course, this is everything. We never know, what our particular users are using or where they are. So this will always update everything for all localities across the nation and any other jurisdictions, Guam or whatever, where US payroll is in effect. Micronesia, I think, was added recently last year. At the top of this report is a link directly to our payroll tax update guide online. And this is just another great resource for all of our users and us. I look at this thing myself because there are so many changes, especially if you're running in a place like Ohio or Pennsylvania, Kentucky, where you've got a ton of local tax. They slice and dice their locations. You got school district taxes. All that stuff changes regularly, gets updated with different rates, different limitations. Sometimes they'll split a school district into new ones. All of that's going to come from our payroll tax update. So it's really more a payroll tax settings update. There's also going to be a section on payroll tax changes coming for next year. So really, it's a great resource to watch, to actively watch, to keep an eye on. Just another resource you can use to keep on top and keep abreast of all these changes. So that. So finally, the IRD is our special year-end update. It's always been called the IRD simply because it comes in between the regular updates. This is the one that covers specific program changes in preparation for filing tax forms. This year, it's more important than ever to install the latest updates, even if you don't think you need them now, because they are going to lay groundwork and program, code for things coming next year. So if there's any chance you might need to report on tips or overtime or any 1099 reporting next year, you should really install the updates before the start of 2026. And we will get into more of why that will matter on our next webinar tomorrow. Okay, so let's just get back into the software for a minute. You can see I love this help menu. This time it's going to be resources. So help menu and resources. Same one I pulled up a few minutes ago. This is where you're going to find access to the knowledge base, but it's also going to be the quickest way to get to your downloads. So that link will open our download portal, and you'll see all the different versions that are currently available. Again, the latest ones aren't out yet. We're aiming for December 20th, so around then you'll see download payroll 2.26.0 will show up here along with the IRD for 2025 and other product updates that are coming. Once you have the download done for the update that you're looking for, or while you're waiting for it to finish downloading, the next best step is to jump up to File menu and then down to Run. In Run, you're going to type in *info. It's in there already because it's been used and it stores memory of the different things I've run. So *info, push OK, and you're going to get a system information window. This is another place you can use to check, the updates you're running. But the critical part here is right in the middle, the installed directory path. A lot of times when I talk to users, the part they're the most nervous about is installing the updates to the right place, right? Yeah, these updates are all going to install onto your server if you have a server, right? That's where your main Sage 100 install is going to live. I don't, obviously. I'm just running on my laptop, so mine starts with the local C drive, but yours would start with most likely a network path. And you would want to select it and all the way up to where it ends in MAS 90, right? The old name of Sage 100, MAS 90. If you have home, ignore that. This is the path that you would want to install your product updates to. So while you've got the product update downloading, or, you know, whenever you're ready, come in here, select that path and copy. So you'll have it ready when you run the update, and most of the updates now are coded so that it should look at your program install and see where the correct path is, but it's always great to have that handy so that you can confirm it or just simply paste it into the installation window so you can be sure that you are pointing to the correct path. The usual caveats will apply. Backup. All your users need to be logged out. And of course, you can always have your IT person do this for you. You know, it's always good to have a knowledgeable person on your staff who knows your network. But it is a very simple installation process. Another top question for year end: can I run W-2s or 1099s from Sage 100 2021, 2020, and others unsupported versions? So the answer here, just like most years, unlike last year, is the Aatrix tax reporting forms update independently from the Sage 100 version. So even older versions may be able to run the 2025 W-2 after updating the forms. However, only supported versions listed in documentation will receive the required year-end updates, ensuring data is routed correctly from Sage 100 files to the tax reporting forms. And Sage 100 support can't really assist with any issues running W-2s or other tax reporting forms in unsupported versions. This is going to matter even more next year with the coming changes. We talked already about what's required for this year, but those things are actually going to be required for next year as far as the tips reporting and the you know, overtime, all of that. So this is going to matter even more next year. Bears repeating, get those updates installed at the end of this year, please, so that you're ready. Corrections can always be made directly in the Aatrix forms processor. So if you've gone through that process, you'll sometimes refer to it as the grid, or it's the on-screen spreadsheet where you get the list of your vendors or the list of your employees. And that Aatrix processor will allow you to change and correct almost anything in there. I will review those steps with a demo in tomorrow's session when we're actually looking at the demos for running W-2s and 1099s. And that brings us around to our Q&A portion. So if you have any remaining questions and you haven't posted them yet, please do so. And Linda, what do we have?
Good job, Alec. Well, I tried to answer as many as I could. There was a few that I think that you could answer. One was from Beth. Did I hear correctly that the IRD is scheduled for 12/20, a Saturday? Do you want to answer that?
The 20th is indeed a Saturday.
Yes, and I think it's the 18th is what they've determined, which it is on target. So.
That's a Thursday. Great. Okay, so a little earlier than expected, which is great. You know, just, you know, if it's not there first thing of the 18th, just keep checking. Sometimes there are last minute things. We've all lived through the same year this year. We all are aware of how many unique challenges there were this year, and the corresponding delays that's delayed everything really. So we're doing our best to get it out on time.
Christy had a question. Will tax updates for 2026 also be completed by the December 20th date? You want to take that?
Probably is the answer. You know, our tax cloud is handled by a unique global Sage team. I haven't done any testing for a 2026 check, but my guess is that it's probably already up there and ready to go. So like I said before, always important that you actually run period end processing, close this year, but the check date is going to drive those rates that are applied by the tax cloud. So if you're curious, you can always just open a copy company or create a copy company and roll into new year and do a quick test.
And I might add that the product documents have a tax update listing. I think you showed it a few minutes ago. That list all of the tax updates that are being made, which probably won't all be done by December 20th.
Yeah, it's really unique this year. But on this topic, let me just dive in here and pull up the payroll tax profile maintenance. If you're familiar with payroll, you'll know how important the tax profile maintenance is. If you're not familiar with our payroll, please see the article I wrote on troubleshooting payroll calculations, because there's a ton of great screenshots in there and it walks you through why these windows matter and how they matter. But if I pull up, let's see, California for now. Tax profile maintenance, California, I've selected my location. On the top right, we see a rates and limits button. This will query our tax cloud. You can't edit any of this. This is view only, but you can drill down on some things that are local or like a table rate. There's a drill down button here as well. And you can, and these are enhancements that engineering has added from our users' feedback to make it easier to understand what's going on. So this didn't exist 8 years ago when we first introduced the payroll, but it's been added. So you can come right into your payroll tax profile maintenance, select the profile or the location you're curious about that you've set up, rates and limits button. This is where you would check and confirm any changes to the limits for unemployment, all those kinds of things that change. And you can also double check the table rates. Now, there's an as of field up here at the top left. You can toggle that forward to the next year. Let's actually, January. And then you can see what's happening, what's already in place. If you select the table rate item, you can double click or use the drill down button. You'll get this secondary window as well, where you can check those rates yourself to see exactly what the payroll tax cloud is doing, again, as of 1/15/2026. Okay, so you can get right in there and check it yourself. Any other good ones? I think you might be on mute, Linda.
I'm sorry. Yes, I did. Terry asked, do we need to remember all of the updates needed, or will we be prompted to do those updates? I don't know which updates she's talking about, so that's kind of, I need to know better the question. If it's payroll tax update, yeah, I'll let you finish that.
Only one of these is, or I'm sorry, only two of these are automatic. So the payroll tax update, that's the one that's going to pop up right in the software and remind you. And then the Aatrix forms updates, they update automatically in the background themselves. The rest of the updates you need to install yourself. You need to download them and then install them yourself. Sage 100 is a larger, more complicated software package, what used to be termed ERP in the industry. But essentially, we have so many users who have custom programming installed, doing all sorts of different things. Union payroll, shipping, barcode scanning, tons of different things. When you install an update, if you have custom programming installed, you need to check with the maker of that custom programming, because it wouldn't be Sage. It would be one of our, ecosystem of partners that has used our software development kit to create add-ons. You would need to check with them to make sure that the update is compatible with any custom stuff you have installed. So for that big reason, most of these program code updates remain manually done. Product update, the payroll module update, and at the end of the year, if there is an IRD, which there often is, the IRD also is downloaded manually and installed by the user. Right? So that again is going to be help menu, resources, download, and that'll take you to the download portal. Okay. Generally, we have updates about once a quarter. The ones at year end and for years like this, where things are changing, are extra important, but it's always a good idea to stay up to date. Hope that makes sense.
Okay, Alec. Alec, are you ready for another one?
Yep, shoot.
Avron wants to know, after you open GL year and you make the entries, should you not redo period end so that beginning balance gets recalculated based on new entries? So
Honestly,
in other words, are you required to redo?
You're not required to redo period end processing if you've already run it once for that year or period, whichever you're reopening. The honest answer is the program is smart enough to run your retained earnings calculation no matter what. It'll do it for you. That is not an excuse to not close your year. You always want to run period end processing and close your year, but specifically to Avron's question, if you're reopening your period in GL like I demoed, going into general ledger options, flipping it back to the prior year, push accept, make my entries, update those. I don't need to run period end processing again if I've already run it for that year. I can just come right back into general ledger options and flip it back to where I was. Okay.
Good answer. The only other one I had that I answered briefly was Matthew wanted to know about the PUs that are compatible with the versions for payroll 2.26. Like we state 2022 to 2025. And his question was, what about the PUs? Or is it certain PUs?
So the relation here is to the IRD.
He's asking about the payroll 2.26.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead and cover
2.26.
Yeah.
The 2.26 will install with any version that's currently supported. We always try, and that's going to be the current 3 versions, right? 2025, 24, 23. At the end of the year, we always try to include one more. So 2022, if we can, we only have so many human beings doing all that code and all that work. So if the more changes and the more that's going on, the more, it's difficult to cover that 4th version. But the payroll 2.26 will install on versions as old as 2022 and up. I think that answers that one.
Okay, we just got a bunch of questions all at once.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So.
And just to interrupt for a second, tomorrow's session, there's going to be more of a focus on the OBBBA stuff, the Big Beautiful Bill Act, the fields that were added, and how that might flow to the W-2s. So we're going to hold off on those kind of questions for tomorrow.
And that answers one of Sue's. A person wants a link to tomorrow's webinar.
That'll be up on the community site where you signed up for this one.
Oh, it was posted. Melissa got that for me.
Okay, great. Thank you, Melissa.
I have a 2022 version. IRD only support 2024 and 2025. I only need to process 1099. What is the solution?
This person is running 2022?
Yes. And actually, the IRD is supported by 2023.5.
Mm-hmm. But there's no more updates. There's no more PUs coming for 2022.
No.
So sometimes this comes up. Obviously, you want to get up onto a supported version soon. The changes for 1099s this year are not enormous. If you are making excess gold to parachute payments, you can always make those corrections on the Aatrix forms processor directly. And again, tomorrow I will run through a demo of actually running the 1099s. Or you can install a newer version and migrate your information to that version just to run the forms. In this year, it's probably overkill to do that because of the fairly minor changes with the 1099s. You could probably, if you are giving those excess golden parachute payments, you could probably just correct that in the forms preparer after you run the 1099s yourself. You may be able to just put it into, you know, if you look in the 1099 setup, of course, those fields are all going to have labels. Oops. Windows 11 is giving me some mouse issues. Now, I have the latest updates installed already, obviously. So if I go in here and I look at my one of my 1099 vendors, this is where the excess golden parachute payments box is now. It's box 3 on the NEC, right? But if I cycle back to 2024, you can see there's no field for that, right? This is why the updates matter. It really builds all this stuff in. And especially for next year, for the changes that are coming, those updates are going to lay the groundwork for all of that displaying accurately in these windows and all that functionality to flow through to the forms themselves. So if you are running 2022, now would be a great time to start checking in on your plans to get onto a newer supported version. Best to go directly to 2025. Hope that answers that one. Do we have anything else remaining, Linda, before we finish the session today?
I'm sorry.
No problem.
Marty, we've heard that overtime and tips need to be added to the W-2 this year in the boxes. It was a requirement. We are trying to make that happen for 2025, but it definitely is a requirement for 2026. So
yeah,
we will.
And join the session tomorrow because I'll be talking about that. There is a way that you can do it this year if you desire to. Obviously, the program stuff that we've been working on is going to make it easier for the program to handle those things for you as you're processing tips and overtime throughout the year. But if you want to figure out those amounts, because nothing's ever super simple. It's not a straight count of your total overtime. I will talk about more about this tomorrow, but you would have to figure those amounts, and then I will show you a way tomorrow where you can plug it into the employee maintenance using that tax history, that wage and tax history editing that I showed you. Once you have the updates installed, there will be a field there that you can plug into for the overtime, and then there will be also a column for taxable tips. And of course, again, you can always plug that in directly onto the forms processor in Aatrix once you've started the W-2 processing.
Do you have time for more questions, Alec, or do you want to answer these later? There's like 3 more. They're not too difficult.
We can try. I think the session automatically ends in less than a minute. So we may want to just end now. Any questions remaining, we will follow up on. We're going to post them to the community site by the end of next week, along with the recordings and the answers to the questions and my slide deck. So we'll wrap up there. Thank you very much, Linda, for handling the Q&A. Again, tomorrow's session is covering a lot more of the stuff I've been talking about with the specifics for this year and next year. That's tomorrow at 10 a.m. We've also got a slide for links to a number of our resources that we discussed and the articles that I've referenced. Thank you all for joining us.